All right, so good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining in today. Very, very happy to present UCEED preparation tips in the last 3 to 4 days before the UCEED exam. And as we know, the UCEED exam is on the 22nd of Jan, so just 3-4 days away. And to give you these last minute tips and this final push that you need, or the final encouragement that you need, we have Mahima Prasanna, who's presently studying at IIT Guwahati, and she is an All India rank 66. She's, of course, done this cracked UCEED a couple of years ago, and to interview her and take her through her journey over the last 3-4 days before the UCEED exam, we have Shaun D'Sa, who is the founder of DQ Labs, and he would be discussing with Mahima on the last few tips that you can use for these last few days. Right? Over to you, Shaun. Shaun, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So, hello all students, and you all must be all anxious, and you all have just about 3 days more for your UCEED exam. And this is a perfect time where we have a topper with us, Mahima, who got in last year, and you all can ask all your questions. She will be giving you a lot of tips and information, what you can do, how you can do your best in the UCEED exam. So, Mahima, thanks for joining us.
Hello, sir. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, the first thing I wanted to ask you, Mahima, is the students have 3 days more for the exam from today, right? So, what can a student do in these last 3 days just before their exam coming this Sunday?
So I think it's very important to first things first, not stress out about anything, because you have to just believe in the amount of preparation you've done so far and hope that it will pay off. But the last 3 days should be utilized more for revision rather than learning something new. So like just revise as much as you can, go through Edge, go through the old topics listed, and just like brush up on whatever you already know.
Yes, so that's extremely important there, that generally UCEED is a kind of exam that it tests you how much you've learned over a long period of time. It doesn't really test you how much you can do in the last minute. And like Mahima said, if there's whatever you can just brush up on things that you have studied, and it's not a good time to go into start getting into new topics at this point of time. But one thing I could add there, let's say, for example, if your drawing is something that you can practice extensively in this last 3 days, because even though I will explain to you later on, even though drawing is 60 marks out of 300, but weightage wise it holds a lot in your overall score, because it's very difficult to go up to 240 in your theory part, but drawing you can score high marks. So drawing is something that you can practice. So Mahima, with regard to the drawing section, what do you think students can practice in the last 3 days?
So a pattern that I've noticed in UCEED is they often ask a lot of perspective questions. So 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, exterior, interior. These are very essential skills. So the last 3 days can be utilized to kind of perfect your perspective and your understanding of it. So practice different angles, different views, different situations, environments. So I think that's how I'd utilize it from a sketching point of view.
Yes. Also, like you can even practice like human mannequins and scale and then textures at this point of time, which would be extremely helpful. Okay, great. So students watching this, watching the video, you all can, you have any questions, you all can post it in the chat there, and we can discuss the same, right? Now, Mahima, do you remember, I wanted to ask you about the quality of the paper, okay? Especially the drawing section. So do you remember the quality, the thickness of the paper, and when you draw, does it smudge? Is it thick enough to like good art quality paper, and the quality of the paper and the size, overall size of the paper?
Okay, so the size is a standard A4 sheet, and the quality of the paper is very good. So it's not the cheap thin paper that you get. They give a proper sketching paper, the ones that you get in art books. So that way it's really good. Markers do not bleed easily. I'd suggest do not use alcohol markers because they bleed through most papers. But fine liners and gel pens are still okay.
And did you use markers like, say, for example, you have your brush pens or something like that? Did you use, or you can use the art paper? The paper is thick enough.
Yeah, I did carry all those materials along with me, but I did not end up using it in the exam because we only had half an hour. So most of my effort went in perfecting my lines and my strokes and creating the composition instead of beautifying it at the end. So I think I used a dark pencil to go over the lines. It's also pretty smudge proof, and it's a safe option, a safe bet to take. So I don't think I used any pen. I used a dark pencil to go over my strokes.
Yes, because especially this is unlike NID where you have a lot of time here. It's quite a bit to answer. Even NID you hardly have any time. It's quite a rush there as well. But even here in that half an hour to draw that entire scene, in fact, obviously colors also are not recommended. You'll be just wasting your time. Just do your level best to draw as much as you can in pencil, and as well as to spend more time on textures, like let's say, for example, the sunlight coming in the window, more on textures with your pencil, more than, like you said, there is no time to use color or brush pens or anything like that. Yeah. Do you remember the various materials that you carried, Mahima? Like, say, for example, all the stationery that you carried, all the materials that helped you for your sketching part. What are the different materials you carry?
Yeah, so I remember carrying all materials like color pencils, fine liners, brush pens, etc. because I didn't want to take a chance. They could have asked me to color in the drawing question, but they did not. So we just got a plain sketch. They just asked us to sketch, and I think they specifically told us not to use color. So just read the sketching question a few times, just to like actually, so that you can actually spot these specifications and act on them. So despite carrying all those materials, I ended up using only a 6B pencil. So I first like used very light strokes, used it very lightly, and then once I finalized those lines, I went over it with darker strokes, because one thing they actually assess here was line quality. So they want all your lines to be crisp, and for lines that are closer to be darker compared to those that are further away. So to create all those variations, just carry a set of shading pencils if you're not comfortable using one pencil.
Yes. Okay. Good. The next question I wanted to ask you was, what was your strategy? Like, say, for example, let's go back to the exam hall. So when you enter the exam hall, you will get your booklet. So you'll be in front of the computer, and you will finish your theory aptitude first. And once your aptitude is done, you have to wait, and everybody starts drawing at the same time. So it's exact half an hour for everyone. Is that correct?
Yeah. So at after 2.5 hours exactly, the computer shuts down. So you'll not be able to attempt any more theory questions. The exam will time out, and the sketching question will be displayed on the screen. So from then onwards, you have half an hour to complete sketching. So even if you want to take a little bit more time for theory, you cannot. at exactly after 2.5 hours, the theory part will get over.
Okay, here I have something very interesting, information for all the students. I want you to listen carefully. All the previous years so far, they would have released the interface, the software interface of the UCEED exam on the UCEED portal, but this year they have not. Usually they release it a few days before. Do you remember, Mahima?
Yes, sir. Yeah, they had released.
So generally the software interface is when you go to uc.iitbombay.ac.in, you will be able to log in and you'll be able to log in and use the interface, like say, for example, how to save for later, mark, save and mark, all those information. I'll just pull it up on the screen. Please hold on. Show you what it kind of looked like. Just a second. Okay, so students, if you all can see my screen right now, this was the software interface that was released every year. They used to do it every year on the UCEED portal, and so you all could log in and familiarize yourself with this. So what we'll do is we will release a video tomorrow of the previous software interface of how it was. At least you can get a little familiar with especially the different buttons that you can see on the right side: the green buttons, the purple buttons, the red buttons, and the unmarked buttons. So you have the legend down below which says answered, not answered, marked, not visited, answered, and marked for review. Okay, so we'll release a small video about this interface and how it was last year, since they have not officially opened it this time for everybody to test. Maybe they will in the next tomorrow, hopefully, but in case they don't, this video will be up. So please ensure that you watch this video. It will be helpful for you, at least to get some familiarity with the interface before you go to the exam. Anyway, so
Shaun, on that note, there's a comment on YouTube from Ashwija Tantri, who says that the interface has been released. She sees it on the website, so it's possibly released just released.
Maybe they've just released. But also we'll watch the video. So therefore, if it is released, it is extremely important that you go through it and understand. Especially, you have to understand answered, not answered, marked, not visited, answered, and marked for review. Okay. So remember, anything that is answered and marked for review will be considered. But if it's not answered, let's say, for example, like Mahima said, at the end of the 2.5 hours, your screen will just close. And if you have not answered and if it is red, then you will not get marks for that. But if you have at least answered and marked for review, you will get marks for that, obviously. Or it will be considered for marks, rather. Now, what's the difference between, say, the green one, answered and marked for review? Basically, the difference is, it's like, one, you have answered and you're confident, so you don't want to waste your time in the end checking, so you just leave it as green. With answered and you're marking it for review is, you've answered it, but you're not sure, you want to check that once again towards the end. So let's say, for example, say approximately out of 20 questions, if 12 you have answered and you're confident, they're green, and maybe 8 you want to leave it in purple, that is the option down, you can. Or if you want it just marked, you can just mark it there without answering. Okay, you can come back later. So Mahima, could you run us through the legends and give us your opinion on how you use these buttons? How did you use this interface and how it helped you? Or from whatever you remember, any important notes or anything to keep in mind for the students while using this interface that you see on the screen?
Yeah, so I found the mark tool particularly helpful because sometimes I would be about 80% confident in answering a question, but I wouldn't know for sure. But I also would not want to waste more time going through it again. So in that case, I marked it as answered and marked for review. That's basically to tell me that if I have time, I need to revisit these questions and kind of like rethink them or revisit them. So the only difference between marked and answered and marked for review is marked is when you're almost there, you don't really have an answer, but you feel like you can get an answer. So then you mark it and you come back to it later. But answered and marked for reviews when you've marked an answer, you're sure of your answer, but you just like to revisit it one more time. So these are very powerful tools when you're revisiting your entire all your answers and seeing if you want to change any of them. This is only if you have time at the end. So yeah, that's how you use the marked feature.
Okay, that's very good. So let's go to the next part of the question is let's go now specifically to theory. Okay, so I want to know, Mahima, what was your strategy for theory? It's like basically, how did you uh, answer what was your strategy for the NAT section, MSQ section, MCQ section? What do you suggest? How did you answer? Which one did you answer first or second? What was your overall strategy for the theory part of it?
Okay, so one thing I'd like to add here is this is extremely personalized. So you do whatever you're comfortable with. Each person goes about it slightly differently and has different strong points. But for me, I was particularly confident with multiple choice questions because it's a very objective answer. And a lot of GK questions also come under this section. And GK questions, you either know it or you don't. So I thought this was a very quick way of eliminating everything I already know and moving on. So I started with MCQ, but they also have a very heavy negative marking. So be careful when you attempt this question. But I think it's good to start with MCQ because it avoids a lot of confusion for you in the beginning. It's a good way to just start attempting questions because I knew that if I started with NAT, I would probably work myself up thinking about these answers because you don't have any options there. You have to start and you have to execute you have to think of an answer from start to finish. So that's why I started with multiple choice questions. A lot of them were GK questions. So those I answered in like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I either knew it or I did not. So MCQ is a good way to start. And then I went on to numerical answer type. I kept MSQ for the end because in my year we did not have partial marking for MSQ. Now I think the year after me they introduced it. So basically MSQ was if you even get one of the options wrong. So suppose there are four options and there are three right answers. If I marked only two, I would still get the entire question wrong. So for me personally, it was a huge red flag, and I would even during practice tests, I would struggle with this section. So I just kept it for the end because even if I did answer, the stakes are pretty high. So I did MCQ and NAT because even NAT has a lot of counting questions that you can finish off easily. So the order in which I attempted them was MCQ, NAT, and MSQ. And if I remember right, I think I ran out of time towards the end, so I did not get to attempt all of the MSQ questions either. But I did not have any regrets because I attempted the MCQ and the NAT questions which had the highest weightage first. So NAT also does not have any negative marking. So even if you do not know the answer, the worst thing that could happen is you get zero for that question. So it was a very safe bet for me from a marks point of view, simply from a probability point of view, that even if I make a mistake in NAT, I would get away with it easy. So yeah, that is the order I attempted it. But now because MSQ has partial marking, I think it does not matter if you attempt MCQ or MSQ. It's up to you, and it's each one's personal preference. Yeah.
I will just pull up the partial marking information out here. Please hold on. Okay, so you can see it on the screen. Then I have a minute. Let me see. Okay, so to add to what you said, Mahima, yes, that's a very good strategy. Obviously, to go for uh, uh, MCQ first, right? Even though it has negative marking, that's especially some answers, whatever you know, answer them fast, and then NAT and MSQ. That's definitely something that I recommend as well. You go in that order, and like you said, even if you're getting partial marks out here, so it's not as big as a red flag as earlier, where you get, if you answer even one wrong, you get everything wrong. So let's have a look at the partial marks. So you can get between these combinations +4, +3, +2, +1, or 0 and -1. That is, let's say, for example, +4 is if you have chosen any of the, or if you have chosen all the correct options and none of the incorrect options. Okay, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 2, let's say, but as long as you've selected them all, you get 3 marks. Now, in case there are 4 correct options, you mark 3, you will get +3, and you leave 1. You do not answer a wrong one. Similarly, if there are 4, 3, 2, or more, okay, so that's how it reduces. So it reduces from 4, +4, +3, +2, and +1. But in all cases, as long as you do not mark any wrong answer. But the moment you mark any wrong answer, it goes into -1. So it says, if you read the last line says negative marks -1 in all other cases. So which means that, so even if you got 3 right and you mark pick 1, the 4th one wrong, you get -1. Okay, so, and -1 is the highest. So you don't get more than that. I mean, it doesn't go more negative than that. So read this and understand this carefully. And this will be obviously this will help you with your strategy. So what I recommend here is, let's say you're looking at the MSQ question, you know for a fact out of the 4, say 1 or 2 are correct, you're confident, mark them. The rest of them you're not confident, just leave it, because you could get that -1 if something is wrong. So even if it's like, what would you say if in this case, if let's say you mark, there are 2 options, and the third, either the second or third option, you think you're 50% sure, what would you do, Mahima?
Honestly, I would not take the chance, because in this exam, each and every mark counts, and the last thing you want is to get negative marks for the question. So I'd rather remain where I am than get negative marks. So I don't think I marked any answer unless I was 100% sure of it, or 90% sure. But 50, I would not take the chance personally.
Okay, so there you go. For MSQ, among the 4 options, if only if you're really confident of certain things, mark them. Okay, fine. Next part is, I wanted to go to the drawing section, Mahima. I wanted to ask you, what was your overall strategy? How did you plan yourself in that half an hour for the drawing section?
Okay, so in our year, we got a perspective question, and it was an interior question of a drawing room, which is basically a living room. So I think I spent around 2 to 3 minutes thumbnailing, making thumbnail sketches on the side. These are pretty important because they also show and you don't have to erase them at the end. You can just leave them there. And I did leave them because I wanted to show that I ideated a bit and that I did not just start executing my first idea. This was a tip that I got studying for both UCEED and NID. In both cases, I always made small thumb size sketches on the side of like the basic arrangement and where I wanted things to be, and just two, three of them, just to check out the layout of all the objects and everything. So, yeah, so after I made those sketches, I decided on one of the ideas and went ahead with it. So I think I spent the first 20 minutes just sketching everything out. Again, the technical aspects matter a lot, the perspective matters a lot. So just focus on perfecting that. If something looks wrong to you, if you feel like something is not in perspective, it probably isn't in perspective. So just revisit that and make sure your perspective lines are proper. Also, I did not use scale. A lot of people have asked me this, but I feel like using scale is a waste of time, because what happens when you use scale is you miss out on adding details later. The more time you spare for the end, the more details you can add, and the more the finer you can make you can fine tune your composition. So just use practice freehand lines, practice drawing straight freehand lines. Stick to one point perspective. That's what I did. Because one point perspective also minimizes distortion. So even in the sketch that Shaun sir has pulled up, I think this is my friend's sketch. Here she used one point perspective, and there's a very clear vanishing point in the middle. So just play it safe. Because I remember a friend or two of mine, they'd use 2 point perspective, and there's a lot of room. What happens when you use 2 point is, and this is if they haven't specified what perspective to use. If they specified, go ahead with whatever they said. But if not, 1 point perspective I think is the best, because there's very less room for technical error, and also the objects are not distorted, so you can see what you've the judges can see what you've drawn very clearly. In 2 point perspective, both the sides get compressed, and so it will create confusion in your mind and the person who's looking at it. So also the eye level, unless they've specified, just keep it simple. Keep it technically, it should not have any technical flaws. I think that's the first thing they look for, especially in UCEED. So make sure it's technically simple and technically perfect. So spend around 20 minutes of the half an hour just making sure all your perspectives are right. Never draw, because you're not using scale, and you're also trying not to use eraser. It's very important that the first lines that you draw are very light. The minute you darken them, it's irreversible. Even if you try erasing it, it will not go away. So make sure the skeleton of the sketch is extremely light. If you're good with pressure variation, then use the same pencil. Like I used a 4B or 6B pencil throughout. So I started off by drawing very lightly, and then on top of that, after I got the major things in place, like the door, the furniture, the table, then start paying attention to the details that they've mentioned in the question. So I'm not sure how UCEED works now, but 2 years ago they had mentioned a watering can, a cat. So actually, like, form a checklist and check it off your list each time you include it, because they're very important. If you miss out even a small detail, then there's a lot of scope for cutting marks. So don't miss out because of any of that. So just make sure you include all those details. That's the next round. And then once you have that, then you can maybe go over it with a darker pencil. So the same pencil or a darker pencil, just go over your lines, highlight what you want to be highlighted, highlight what they've asked in the question. That's important. Draw attention to that so that they know that you've included it. They don't have to like look twice or check twice. So in this case, the cat, the watering pot, and all of that, just go over it with a darker pencil. And so the last 10 minutes should be focused on just neatening it up and darkening lines, and yeah, adding detail. And add, if you have time, then well and good. You can add a little bit of shade and shadow, but don't use color, because the minute you start using color selectively, you'll feel like using it everywhere, and then there's no right or wrong. So if I start using color in some places, the invigilators would wonder why I did not use it in other places. So there's a lot of room for subjectivity and questioning. So as a rule of thumb, we were also told this while we were practicing: do not use color. Just stick to a pencil sketch, and if you have time and you want to show details after you finish, then maybe just do a pencil shading of shadows and all of that. Shades and shadows, basically. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So Nancy Kumari has basically, I think your question has has been answered. So Nancy, as well as Graphics and me, another person has asked, are we allowed to use scale? Did you carry a scale? So you got your answer. Yes, obviously you can carry your scale. Sometimes in the question, they will be very specific and say, do not use scale. If that is there, obviously you should not use, but in case they don't say anything, just like Mahima said, and I would definitely reiterate on that. If you actually you use scale, you're slowing yourself down. So right in the beginning itself, you should practice lines so that you don't use scale and you go more freehand, and obviously you can draw much faster. Okay, but if you are the kind of person who has practiced the scale and that's what you're used to, then don't change your style in the last minute. Okay, so just a second, let me see. So we have a question from Neku who says, is pencil shading really important? Well, see, if you look at the criteria, they'll even give you criteria out here. Can you see these? There's a note and evaluation criteria. This will be part of your exam. Okay, so the note here is make pencil sketches only, do not use colors. So obviously, if they've written here, do not use colors, you do not use colors. If they say do not use scale, then do not use scale. And also, they have given you evaluation criteria like observation, imagination, selection and composition of objects, quality of line, presentation, and attention to detail. So, to answer your question, is pencil shading really important? Basically, pencil shading will come in the overall presentation where you're putting texture or things like that, and you're giving a little shadow or things like that. So it is part of presentation, and since the test here is to see your overall theme sketch, I think it's really important. So you must have enough of time there to put. Obviously, go in terms of priority. First is like get your basic screenshot right, get the frame right, get all the details in, and last, put in as much as a shade, shadow, and texture. That's where your shading comes into play. For example, sometimes they do mention it was morning or it was evening. So if they say morning or evening, it indicates that's, say it's either 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, so that the sun is at a certain angle. So your rays of light coming in through the window is of a certain angle. And if you want to show rays of light, obviously you will have your skill for texturing will be tested. Okay. You would like to add to that, Mahima, anything? Or especially the evaluation criteria?
Yes, sir. So, like talking about the evaluation criteria, observation is what. Sir, could you show that page? The screen. Yeah. So, observation is what was there in the question. So just your replication of that and your ability to put two and two together. Imagination is what you add to the sketch. So this goes above and beyond whatever they give you in the question. You don't have to stop at the detail that they provide. You can add your own touch to it. You can add your own add whatever you want to it. Like for example, in my batch, so it was a basic drawing room question where they like draw a living room, and they gave us a few prerequisites. But I think I took it a step further and made it Vincent van Gogh's room. So I added a plaque with his name on it, a newspaper from the 1800s, something like that. So basically, that's imagination is the story that you tell with the sketch. And then I still can't see this screen, sir.
I'm sorry, I just got disconnected for a second. I'm sharing the screen again. Sorry.
No problem.
Just a second. There you go. 1 minute. I'll give it very specific to the one you were talking about. There we go.
Yeah. then selection and composition of objects is basically the arrangement of objects with respect to each other. So if they've given us, if they've asked you to use two different flowering pots, how they interact with each other, how you place them, where you place them, all of this matters in the final composition. Then quality of line is basically, so the lines that are the objects that are closer to you will have a darker stroke compared to the objects that are further away. That's a very subtle way of showing perspective. So also how crisp and neat your lines are. Try not to go over the same line again and again, or erase and scratch the paper. Try to avoid all of that. Presentation is the overall presentation, and attention to detail is probably where the shading and everything comes in. So like Shaun sir was saying, if they've specified that the light is filtering in through the left window, or if it's morning, then you know that the direction of sun is inherently mentioned in the question. So automatically you'll align your shadows and your shading to suit that. So that will also come under attention to detail, how closely you pay attention to the way objects interact in a certain lighting or in a certain atmosphere. So yeah.
Okay, we have some interesting questions coming up. So the next question is from Raul De Mello. Rahul asks that, are you shown the drawing question before the drawing time starts?
No, we're not shown that. So the first it's almost like two separate exams. The first 2.5 hours only for theory. You'll be shown only the theory questions, half an hour. So they don't really mix up the sections. Unlike NID. In NID, they do. I think we got it simultaneously. We could start with whichever one. But UCEED has a very clear-cut time boundary for each section.
So it is displayed on your screen itself, the question?
Yeah, so after 2.5 hours, the theory part gets locked. You can't see the questions, you can't make any more changes, and the part B gets displayed. So the sketching question is displayed, and you're already given a sheet of paper. They give that before the start of the exam. So you just have to, so maybe just draw borders and keep ready while you're sitting waiting for the exam to start. So yeah, you'll be able to attempt it only after 2.5 hours.
Okay, Rahul, so I hope that answers your question. Next question is from Ashwija Tantri. Did you get enough time to do the shading and shadows? Personally.
Yeah, I did, because when I was practicing for UCEED, I practiced every question under 20 minutes. So in reality, during the exam, when we had half an hour, it was a luxury of time for me. So I finished well ahead of time, and I did have time for shading shadow. I think I added a wooden texture, basic shadows and everything. So I did save 10 minutes just for that. So I think when you're practicing in the next 3 days, if it's not too much of a pain, try practicing, attempting each of these questions under 20 minutes. That way, in the exam, when you have half an hour, you will be able to finish comfortably.
Okay, so we have another interesting question from Datvi. So Datvi is asking, can we use black gel pen when they specify that we should use colors? So they have specified here, like you can see on the screen, do not use colors. So her question is, can you use the black gel pen?
Yeah, as long as it's not colors, I think we should be fine. But just be careful while using pens, because they're irreversible. So one stroke here and there could lead to ruining the entire sketch if you're not careful. But I don't think, yeah, I think you can use gel pens. It doesn't come under the category of colors. So just be prudent when using it.
Or maybe to be on the safe side, since they're, I mean, even though it's a black color, what you're saying is right, to be on the safe side, just stick to pencil for this exam. You know, it would be also to be on the bit of the safe side. But yes, technically it's black, it's not a color. It can be used, but you can go the safe route as well. 1 minute, just let me see. Okay. For the theory part, Mahima, the question here is, or rather theory drawing, is a rough sheet given for solving? Or also, I'll just add to that question, is that rough sheet also, like say you want to make your thumbnail sketch, right? Before you want to make your final sketch on drawing, is rough sheet provided basically?
Yeah, so they do provide a rough sheet. That's where I did all my calculations and everything. But for the thumbnail sketches, I suggest use the fair paper itself, use the margins because you want them to see that. They're not going to look at your rough sheet. That's just for your reference. They're going to collect it, but I think they'll throw it away. They're not going to refer to it. So if you want your thumbnail sketches to be noticed, then you might want to draw it beside the fair paper itself.
Yes, that's a very good strategy to have your thumbnail sketch there also, so the examiner knows how you're thinking. That's good. We have another question from Sudarshini BN. So she's asking, does the previous year's paper really help you? I mean, solving past year's papers, did it really help you?
Yeah, I think solving past year papers is what helped me the most because that gives you a true glimpse of what will come in the exam. So solving material from any book or any general questions helps you, but only to a certain extent. You still don't know what to expect in the exam. But I think I did I think I did all the past year papers multiple times. And after doing that, it made me realize that the same pattern kind of gets repeated. So the same question will not come, but you can expect very similar questions. So if you go through the past year papers, it's very important to learn from your mistake and not just leave it there. So the only way you'll be able to apply the knowledge that you've learned from the past year papers is if you revisit the question and go through videos and other reading material related to the question. So don't just stop at solving the past year papers because the same question will definitely not come. The same type of question will come. So then go over the reading material, go over the video explanations given. I think they're included on Edge also. Go over those explanations. Those are very important if you want to learn something from that experience. So yeah, past year papers are extremely important. They give you a basic idea of exactly what to expect in the exam.
We have another question, Mahima, from Ananya Krishna. She's asking, what was your main focus while you were preparing for your UC? Or rather, do you have a main focus, or was your focus more spread?
So if we're talking just about UCEED, I think I focused more on theory because UC theory is way tougher than NID theory. At least I found it way tougher. But the sketching part was taken care of during NID preparation. So I would learn perspective, I would learn sketching, shading, human figures, mannequins, everything already for NID. So for UC in specifically, I focused more on theory. And so I did this one thing before the exam. I think since you guys have just 3-4 days left for the exam, you can start making formula sheets and revisiting formulae because a lot of these theory questions, if you assess all the past year papers and identify patterns, they can all be solved using most questions can be solved using a formula. So identify these formulae and keep practicing them. So this way what will happen is it'll come to you naturally during the exam. It'll be like second nature. You don't have to recall a method for solving the question, you just have to directly apply the formula. So this was particularly helpful for me. So for UCEED, I did focus more on the theory part because it was tougher than NID. And for the sketching part got taken care of. But if you're someone who hasn't attempted NID, then you need to also focus on sketching because it does have 60 marks and it can really set you apart from the rest. So that's the way I would plan.
We have one question from Divya S. So she said, with respect to NAT, right, what are the topics that you covered in math?
What are the topics that I covered? Can you repeat the last part, sir?
In mathematics, right, for the NAT section, right? What topics did you cover? Do you remember the topics that you covered, or the topics that you think under math to give importance to?
Yeah, so I think under mathematics, there's a lot of importance being given to probability and permutation and combination because these are the slightly more logical applications of the mathematical topics. If you've done past year papers, you notice that they don't really ask calculus or hardcore maths. It's more application based. So permutation, combination, probability, these are concepts that should be far superior. Also, they ask a lot of counting questions in that. So they'll give you a complex figure and ask you to count the number of certain shapes or certain patterns in that figure. So those are also questions that you can practice easily. So you need to come up with your own counting pattern. So either left to right, top to bottom. There are many strategies for solving these questions. So figure out your own strategy, whatever works for you. But under math, I'd say focus on these topics: probability, permutation, combination, wherever logic can be applied. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there are some questions coming back to the sketching part. Okay, I'll read out the questions. Okay, so Datri is asking, do they specify the size of the sketch? Like say, for example, at NIV, when boundary, black boundary is given. So here, is there any boundary given that is specifying the outer dimensions of the sketch on your A4 answer sheet? So is there a boundary given?
Yeah, as far as I remember, there is a black boundary and you have to draw your sketch within that. So
And also I did, yeah. So did you, yeah, okay. So Divya S is also asking, did you draw your thumbnail sketches out of those margins, out of that boundary?
yeah, out of the boundary. Basically, the
Yeah,
boundary is only for your final sketch. If you start making thumbnail sketches within that, they might object because they want your sketch to be of a particular size and a uniform size for everyone. So whatever doodling you want to do, make sure you do it outside and in the boundary without wasting any further space. Just directly start sketching your final sketch.
okay. Some of you all have answered, asked questions in your score, your, your minimum percentile, and uh, we'll go through that later. I'll open a screen showing you like the previous years, what has been the approximate marks for students. But before that, we'll just see if we can finish off all the questions in this section. Okay, so somebody's asking, are you allowed to use fine liners? Well, we did answer that question, and like we said, as long as it's not color, because sometimes they'll specify no color. Technically, it's black. You can use fine liners, but maybe to be on the safe side, try and use pencil only is possibly what I suggest, since they've strictly said no colors, even though they have not said use pencil only. So you can, if you want to. Did you use fine liners, Mahima, when you were answering?
No, sir. I strayed away from using pens in general because I thought it's a very costly mistake. So I
Okay,
just use
so
one
you
singular pencil. That's it.
single pencil. So that's what I highly recommend for this. Yes, for the NID exam, I have asked students, please go ahead, feel free to use, what do you say, fine liners. But here I would suggest stick to pencil, and that it's within your pencil. For example, the sketch that I showed earlier, just pencil, and that's particular sketch got 56 out of 60. So even just pencil can get you very high marks. Okay. Now, Deepika, I know you've asked a couple of times questions on tricks to use 3-point perspective. You've asked twice actually for something like anti-view. How do you position your vanishing points, 3 vanishing points? I know that question, basically, there are a lot of drawing videos, Deepika. So maybe we can share some drawing videos on 3-point perspective, because it's very difficult for her to verbally explain out here on 3-point perspective, or rather, how do you position your 3 vanishing points? So maybe we can post some links, or you can follow some other DQ Labs videos specific to that. Or it's there on DQ Edge. If you go to DQ Edge and learn how you go about 3-point perspective is very specifically given out there. Okay. Oh, one more very important thing I wanted to tell all of you all is if you go to DQ Edge and go through all the past UCEED papers, there are animations and explanations to every single UCEED question out there. Okay, so if you've not understood a question, or if there's some question you're not getting, you can go to Edge and you can get the animated explanation or a video explanation of every single question. So don't miss that. That's a very key feature on edge.dqlabs.in. Okay, so let's try and see if there are any more questions. Okay, so let's just quickly, some of you all have asked about the cutoffs and, just general thing. I will open one slide out there to see, to share general cutoffs and to show you. Okay, so if you look at this slide, basically these were some ranks that were there in the past that I know for sure. I mean, there are more ranks in this, but this is something that I know for sure. You can have a look at this and see how much a student has scored in Part A and Part B and total out of 300, and the overall rank that the student has got to the left. Like say, if I say rank 66, because rank 151, you're not going to get in. So if you look at rank 151, that is the bottommost row, even though the student got 56 out of 60, I mean, to get 56 out of 60 in your drawing, that's the highest I've heard, and that's almost nailing it. But unfortunately, the student Part A marks was a little low, and the rank dropped to 151. But whereas 66 is a guaranteed rank for you to get into an IIT. And if you see the distribution here, Part A was 112 out of 240, and Part B was 48 out of 60.
These were my marks.
I think there was yours, Mahima. And if you see, now this is very interesting. If you go to rank 42, even though that the student has scored 16 in Part B in drawing, but has got 152 in Part A, it still gives you a rank of 42. So even with the marks of 16 in drawing, I hope this gives you all a good perspective as to. So to be on the safe side, I would say your minimum marks 112 in Part A and is what you need. And obviously, if you're getting 112, you need 48 or above in Part B to still be under the cutoff, or very close to this, plus or minus 1-2 marks, because you can still go up to 80, 85 and still get a seat. Now that there are a few more seats there for you all. And of course, anything above 112 in Part A is safe. And obviously, the more you get, like you see on the screen here, the more you get above 132, 152, and then, even if your Part B comes down a little, nothing like it. But obviously, if you're good in drawing, nothing like, and Part A, obviously, that's the ideal combination. Okay. So a lot of students had asked regarding what is your cutoff percentage, what are the cutoff marks. So a couple of questions that were there. So I hope this answers your questions. Okay. So we are almost coming to the end. We don't have too much time. We just have 5 minutes more. Okay, we have a question from Ishana HS. So Ishana says, how did you manage your time while attempting part A of the exam? I think that's an important one, what you remember. How did you manage your time, Mahima?
Yeah. So like I said, I decided the order in which I'd be starting. So a lot of this I decided before the exam. So I decided that I'll be starting with MCQ and then going on to MSQ. Also, I made sure I did not spend more than 10 minutes in on any question. So 10 minutes itself is a lot. So this is the maximum I would spend on any question. More than 10 minutes, I would just leave the question and move on because ultimately I wanted to finish the paper. But I think I did end up leaving two, three questions in the MSQ. I did not have time to come to that. So just I'd say just don't get carried away when you come get like when you chance upon a question. Make sure you have enough time to attempt all the other questions also. So 10 minutes is the outer limit you should be spending on any question. Maximum 5 minutes because you can't afford to spend that kind of time. But if you're almost there and you can see yourself finding the answer in the next 2-3 minutes, then it's worth it, especially for NAT because it carries 4 marks. See it through and finish it off. But if you're not getting a question, just move on. Also, do not get psyched because the beginning, I mean, if you start off with MCQ, you might have a few difficult questions in the beginning. Just remember that there are questions out there for you. There are questions that you will get. So try to maintain a cool mind throughout the exam. Stay level-headed. Do not get psyched or anything like that. Apart from that, for time management, so the GK questions you should know straight off the bat. You can't afford to waste time thinking of them or recollecting facts. So that's why these next 3 days just brush up on your GK. So I think Shaun Sir on Edge has these made these concise GK topics. So they basically have a few questions and basic content under GK. So just make sure you know all of those topics so that you don't waste time during the exam. Because whatever extra time you spend on the math questions, you can save if you know the GK questions properly. So those should not be a problem. But then again, it depends from year to year. Some years have a lot more GK questions than other years. So it really depends on the paper you get. But just try not to get carried away by one question. Try to remember that there are other questions and try to move on as fast as possible. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so Ananya Krishna is asking which college did Mahima get it? Mahima is in IIT Guwahati. Yeah, that's about it. And thank you for coming, Mahima. And oh, just one thing I wanted to ask you: did you get nervous before your exam, or what? How would you were you nervous, and how would you tell students to prepare themselves for? I mean, those who do get nervous for the exam, I'm sure most of them do. Any thoughts on that?
I was very nervous before the exam, so I don't know if I'm the right person to give advice on this because we were sitting in the exam hall in front of the screen waiting for the theory part to load. So it was like a ticking bomb. But I think just remember that it's not the end of the world and that there are other exams, there are other colleges. So it's not the end all by all of any situation. So just try to keep calm. And also, if you don't do well in theory, always remember that there is scope in the sketching part. So I personally did not do as expected in theory. I got 112 as Shaun Sir showed, but I got 48 in sketching and I made up for it. So just don't get psyched looking at the theory questions alone. If you know you have good sketching skills, trust those skills and trust that they'll help you do well. So just remember that there are two parts to the paper, and even if you don't do as well in one part, there's always another part. So try to compartmentalize that way and just try to maintain your cool. I know that it's a very stressful exam. It was very stressful for me also, but I think once you start attempting the questions, you'll ease into the process.
Yes. So one more final thing I wanted to remind students again. Please remember, students, if you go to DQ Edge, every question is solved there. Like if I quickly show you an example. You will literally see animations like this. Um, um, you,
Shaun, you need to share sound.
A. The rope weaves into the loops formed here, so that when the ends are pulled, a knot will form. So A forms a knot. Now, option B. We can see that the rope intertwines itself at every junction, so it will form a knot when the two ends are pulled. So as you can see, B forms a knot too. Now, option C, as you can clearly see, is just twisted around itself. And so, when the two ends are pulled, the rope will unravel and open out without a knot. So, no knot for option C. Now, for our last option, it clearly forms interlinks. Hence, when we pull the two ends, it will definitely form a knot.
so once again, I'm showing this to you all because those who have missed it, it's extremely important that you watch these explanations and you can understand all the questions that you've not answered, you've not understood. Okay, it's extremely helpful and it's uploaded there on edge.dplabs.in. So once again, Mahima, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for sharing your experience, your thoughts, and sharing some valuable tips and insights into your exam. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mahima. Bye.
Bye.